Well, we are back in Hebrews and we're in chapter 11, starting in verse 30 today. By faith, the walls of Jericho fell after the people had marched around them for 7 days. Again, they could have believed that, well, God is great, that's awesome, but we're not going to go march around a wall for 7 days. That just seems a little silly. But they trusted, they believed God would do what he said he would do, and so they obeyed him. It caused them to carry out the action plans that God set before them. And of course, that brought down the walls. By faith, the prostitute Rahab, because she welcomed the spies, was not killed with those who were disobedient. So she had an understanding, a revelation, that the God of the Israelites, the God of the Hebrews, is the one true God. And so she acted upon it. She welcomed the spies, she hides them, and then she hangs the scarlet out her window, and her house is saved. So she was not killed, and all of those that were with her were not killed because they also believed with her. They could have said, you're crazy and we're not going to stay with you, but they believed even her word. And so she was obedient. She followed what the spy said. She was obedient, and her life and all of her family's life was saved. And also, not only that, but later on we see that she marries as into the Hebrew family, and then becomes part of Jesus' lineage because God honored that faith that she had. In 32, and what more shall I say? I do not have time to tell about Gideon, Barak, Samson, Japheth, David, Samuel, and the prophets, who through faith conquered kingdoms, administered justice, gained what was promised, who shut the mouths of lions, quenched the fury of the flames, and escaped the edge of the sword, whose weakness was turned to strength, and who became powerful in battle and routed foreign armies. All of these because they walked in faith. They had revelations by God, and they were persuaded to do God's will. They had a sureness that what they hoped for, and they were certain of what they did not see. They trusted the invisible God would carry out exactly what he said he would do, and they obeyed him. Others were tortured and refused to be released so that they might gain a better resurrection. Verse 36. Some faced jeers and flogging, while still others were chained and put in prison. They were stoned, they were sawed in two, they were put to death by the sword. They went about in sheepskins and goatskins, destitute, persecuted, and mistreated. The world was not worthy of them. Now, these are a little bit more recent, according to the Hebrews time, the author of Hebrews, according to his time, where a lot of this was taking place because there were a lot of persecutions that were taking place. And he says that the world's not worthy of them. They went through all this torture because their faith. They never gave up. Somebody who is so convinced, that has this revelation and persuaded to do God's will. They have this faith, and they are certain of this hope. They are sure of the hope, and they are certain of what they cannot see. Somebody who lives that way. It doesn't matter what man does to them. No matter what torture or persecution and abuse that they endure, they will never let go of who God is because they have truly understood who he is. The last thing you want to do is to let go of him. They wandered in deserts and mountains and in caves and holes in the ground. These were all commended for their faith, yet none of them received what had been promised. God had planned something better for us so that only together with us would they be made perfect. So God, even though they may have received some promises that they didn't see fulfilled on earth as they may have understood, God has something better prepared for them. And when they were taken home into heaven, they are given every bit of that promise and the glories of heaven and the presence of God, which is far beyond any understanding. That's the best gift and promise you could possibly receive. So there's this wrong Western belief that if you're having negative outcomes, that means a lack of faith. Well, you look at the story of all these people, a lack of faith or an insufficient faith, but you see what these people went through, and you would have to say those are lies, because faith has to encompass both triumph and tragedy. And these people knew that God was going to come again. They knew that Jesus would return a second time. They might have thought it was coming right then. Many of them did. Many of them thought Jesus was coming very soon. But they didn't get to see that second coming then. Now they are going to be a part of it, which is incredible because they're going to be able to be a part of that those that are taken back up, that the dead in Christ shall rise first and meet him in the air. And so they are going to see his second coming. That promise will be fulfilled. And so this is why we cannot belong to the world, or from this world, in this world, to this world, any of it, because our perspective is not the same as the world's. It is that supernatural perspective. It is beyond natural. And you have to trust so much in God that when he gives you a revelation that the world and the natural doesn't make sense, that you're still going to be persuaded to do God's will, no matter what that looks like. I was also, just as a side note, as I'm closing up this chapter, as I was thinking through all these different ones, I was just thinking about Enoch, because he walked with God, and he didn't actually start walking with him until his son Methuselah was born. And so somewhere in there, he wanted to be a better parent. He wanted to be a better man for his son. And so he became more dependent upon God. And as he did, he began to walk with him. And that's what I've been trying to do in my morning routines, is get up early so that I can begin to do those walks with God. And honestly, I don't really talk that much. I just want to be in his presence. And for a little bit, I felt guilty that I wasn't actually talking, that I probably should be praying and asking him to, or interceding for different ones and for the nation and for all these different things. But at the same time, I was like, the Lord was saying, no, just abide. Just abide and walk in my presence. There's going to be times that you intercede. But in this morning time, it's just you and me. Just walking together. I will give you what you need and the wisdom that you need in our walks. But it's okay to be still and not have to speak. There's that bonding that grows in just that walk. And that's what Enoch did. He just walked with God. And as he did, well, there's even a whole book that he wrote, the Book of Enoch. It is filled with prophecies and so much wisdom in that book. It is a fascinating book. I highly recommend reading it. The Bible that's one of the references the Bible even says, is to go and read the Book of Enoch. It is a powerful book that gives further insight to me that those simple times of just walking with God, that he gives you more and more revelation, and you want to carry those out. You want to obey God, and you want to just spend time with him. And he reveals more of himself to you the more and more we do that. So that's where I want to be. I want to be in that place of just walking with God on a regular basis and allowing him to pour into me and to spend that time with him. And I pray that's your prayer as well. So join with me next week as we dive into chapter 12 and 13 and finish off this book, since this was a little bit longer of a study this week for chapters 10 and 11. But I look forward to talking with you next week about the rest of Hebrews and tying it all together as he finishes his letter.